Belgrade Beat, the pulse of the city.
So, hi there, how's it going?
Hi, how's it going? Good.
Good, this is Belgrade Beat, and I've got my friend Brian, who I met today for the first time. You contacted me last year through Facebook, I guess, after seeing my YouTube.
Yes.
Okay, and you've been coming to Belgrade for a while.
This is my third year. Third
year in Belgrade, and you're kind of like a global traveler, traveling nonstop, going around the world, checking out different countries, and from what you say about this place, especially when you're here, it's clear to me that this is one of your favorites.
It is.
So you are a connoisseur of culture, and this one has become somehow palatable for you to visit and continue to visit. And I want to talk about that and all the other places you've been, and just sort of give this is what Belgrade Beat, my channel, is all about, is giving sort of alternative from the mainstream Serbian view of Belgrade.
Sure.
Sort of a global cosmopolitan viewpoint on this city, what it means, why I like it, and why people like you like it. And a lot of people watching this will be interested in learning about Belgrade, maybe because they want to move here, maybe they want to take their next holiday here. So let's get into it.
Awesome. Well, hi guys. Great to be on.
Tell us a bit about you first.
So my name is Brian. I am originally from the United States, outside of New York, and I have been traveling now for about 5 years.
Yeah.
I started traveling on my own when I moved for school. I went to NYU, and I found ways to squeeze in trips in between classes and on weekends and breaks, and I got really passionate about solo travel and really finding parts of the world that really matched what I really love. So whether meeting people, trying different cuisine, experiencing different urban environments, studying. My studies at school were about globalization and international relations, so obviously learning about how the world has changed as it's become global and using technology to kind of document all of that. So I've just been traveling now for about coming on 6 years now.
Wow. And you're how old?
I'm 23 now.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I started at a similar age, traveling around the United States, grew up in Toronto, had a car at that point, and then sold my car so I could take increasingly longer trips into Europe.
Yes.
Got Europe addicted, and ended up living here long term. So
Right.
Specifically Serbia long term, a little bit in the UK, families from Austria and Slovakia, so it stopped there. And your roots are just American, or?
Typical European mutt. I have no connection to Serbia.
Yeah. So you can't trade, like my dad's from Austria, for example, and so nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Drew you anywhere through this region, because usually it's people who have Serbian roots or who love this place. But why? Okay, so what was, when the first time you came, what was your impression? What surprised you?
Sure. So I came 3 years ago now. So I guess it was summer of 2017. This is my third summer, and I was looking for something very different for Europe. I really enjoy Europe in the summer. The weather's lovely, but I find that the tourism flow in most of Western Europe and some of the very popular cities make the cities kind of lose a little bit of their authentic touch.
Certainly.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So I was looking for something that was not only different, but also very affordable and kind of off the beaten track a little bit, so to speak. And I had a few contacts and friends who do enjoy this city, and it was on my radar for many years. And I'm also a big Airbnb user, so sometimes when I would be bored, I would be looking at the map and say, where can I live for a month for a certain price anywhere in Europe? And what I would find is that there was a concentration of beautiful places to stay here in Belgrade.
Yeah.
So I kind of booked it on a whim. I took a leap of faith by booking a whole month, which I don't do as much anymore.
So this was 2 years ago, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And from the moment I landed, I really just fell in love with the place. There's absolutely something unique about it. You chronicle that at length on your channel, but there's so much, whether it's the interactions with locals, the ease of getting to know the city. It's a very manageable sized city. You can walk it very comfortably in a day. And I happen to really luck out with a great place to stay. I still stay in the same apartment in Vračar every summer. And from that moment, I just dove right into the place, and I actually was connected with the Polyglot Club here, the language club that meets.
Right.
And I was told about a Serbian course that was starting literally the next day. And so I walked in the next morning, and I signed up. And that course, it was at, can I plug the name of the school?
Yeah.
Centar za Srpski kao strani jezik. So
yeah.
right here on Knez. And I just, through that course and through the people I met there in that whole month, absolutely fell in love with the place, and I've been coming back ever since.
Okay. Well, so you touch on a couple of the things that I am constantly saying, that this is sort of like a really good plug-and-play destination, that the first time you come here, if you come here and you just have any into a way that you can make friends, immediately it's just so welcoming. You come here, you know, you can get around in English without a problem,
Right.
and have actual real conversations, which is something I lack, you know, for example, when I travel in Asia
Yes.
or Latin America a lot. But here it's just like almost everybody who you would deal with in a social situation can converse in English, and
Absolutely.
that's one of the benefits for expats. That's one of the things that really makes it a plug and play destination, not just for a vacation, but for like actually building a life for yourself.
I agree, and that I found that Serbs, and you've often covered this, is they have such a nonchalant friendliness that it doesn't feel like they're being they're just faking it because you're a visitor. They're not really a particularly I don't feel like I'm constantly being ripped off. I don't feel like anyone's trying to use me. I just feel very welcomed in a way that was really refreshing and different. And the language, I think, also Serbian is a very easy language to pick up. It's easy on the ears for somebody who's coming from a Western country. It doesn't
Sure.
feel like a very foreign sounding language, which for some people can be a big...
Wait a second. You speak Chinese, right?
Well,
In comparison to that, I mean, you have a point.
Sure, but what I mean from an expat viewpoint, you know, if you go to a country, even where the script is different, now they use both.
Hold this for a second.
Yeah, they use both Cyrillic and Latin scripts here, but you'll find that on a daily basis, the types of menus, signs, things that you're going to be interacting with in terms of trying to understand, you can start to make things out pretty well. And I really love how the language, and not only the language, but the communication style is very visitor friendly, and people are very happy to engage. And there isn't a grunt when people speak English. There's more of sometimes an inspiration if people haven't spoken it in a while, they want to practice, or there's an actual trying quality which feels very friendly. Whereas if you go some places in Europe,
Prague, Budapest, and all those places, they're
Right.
so tired of this, and
you're afraid to speak English because you feel like almost like this shame, like sorry, like I have to ask for
sorry
this.
that I'm a foreigner in your country.
Yeah, trying to get to
spending
know
my
your
money
culture.
here.
Exactly, and I would feel that particularly as you head towards France and so forth. That region can be
Oh my God.
very
Yeah.
like we are not
Like
part of you.
the thing about France is like, okay, I grew up in Canada, so we had 5 years of French in school, and
Right.
you know I can string sentences together. But if you don't speak French perfectly, they hate you. If
And
you speak English, they hate you. So what am I supposed to do? Just not come to your country or not talk?
Right.
Not order food in your restaurant? Like
Exactly.
None of that here, really.
Exactly. So that was one quality. Should I talk about other things I like?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
The city is remarkably, like I had alluded to before, remarkably walkable and remarkably easy to learn in the way that you can you can quickly discover your favorite restaurants. The cuisine is, I would consider, some of the best in the world, actually. I think the restaurants here are on par with any major European city. In fact, probably better in some places. There's kind of this motivation to create real concept restaurants. Comparatively, on an international standard, it's very affordable. Obviously, that will depend on what you earn in terms of money. But if you're coming, for example, from the UK, Canada, US, Australia, and you come here, you can get an amazing value for your money. And
Absolutely.
it's different than going to Southeast Asia and living on the cheap, because there the experience is vastly different. Whereas here, you can find yourself at a lovely, fine restaurant, have a nice meal, and it's maybe $12 US.
Could I just spin you around for a second over there? We'll change the shot because I
Yeah.
think we're getting too much sun from the back. Just stand there.
Are we still recording?
We're still recording. I don't do edits that much. Okay, come a little closer. Okay, that's better, folks. Thanks for your patience on this. There we go. Ready to go. So basically, yeah. I mean, it's like, but one of the things that I do lack living long-term as an expat here is actually cuisine, international cuisine specifically.
Okay, so I think there's a certain set of things that you can find: Serbian food, Italian food, Turkish food, typical kind of European, traditional pierogi-ish type stuff you can find. There's a few Chinese restaurants, but what I do miss, I would agree with you, is you're not going to be finding
Ethiopian restaurants.
restaurants. Vietnamese pho is something I miss when I'm here.
We have it now.
Okay, well,
Eastok, two blocks down from here.
learn something new every day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's good. Yep.
So it's expanding, but I will say it's certainly more of a range of cuisine and quality of cuisine that can be found in equivalent cities. So I think.
But the thing about the food here that really gets me is the ingredients, the local freshness.
Super
of
fresh,
it.
super fresh.
Super fresh, super local. You go to the market, and the stuff you can find at the market is much superior to what you can find ever in the supermarket.
Absolutely.
And also the health food culture is really amazing. If you learn the health food culture here, it's really rewarding because there's so many small little health food
Yes.
stores and so many traditional. I mean, a lot of Serbian people don't take advantage of this.
Yes.
But I certainly do. I'm learning every one of their products to see what can help me feel better and explore new flavors and just keep myself satisfied
And
in
on
the kitchen.
Yeah, on the note of food, I'm a big supermarket connoisseur. I love supermarkets, and every country I go to, I get far too excited about trying out different supermarkets. And I will say I've probably been to supermarkets in over 50 countries, and I will say that the quality of produce, even the markets are great, but even the quality of produce and general products and stocking and appearance and general supermarket experience and this is something that affects daily life. This is something you won't find as much on Lonely Planet, but as an expat, you're going to want to buy groceries and cook. And so, I mean, there are 24-hour supermarkets, which is a huge rarity in Europe.
The 24-hour thing, yeah, it's just totally like all the time.
Right.
I don't remember, I'm always living around here or a few blocks over, and I don't remember the last time that I lived more than 5 minutes walking away from a 24-hour supermarket.
Yeah, Idea London is 24 hours. There's definitely a night culture in Belgrade, which is obviously its own topic as well. But even just for conveniences, I've never needed to procure something, whether it was food. There's a 24-hour pharmacy right 10 minutes from me. Like literally anything you could possibly need. The other day I needed a charger a charger converter because I had lost mine. There was an electronic shops 2 minutes down from me.
It's incredibly convenient.
Every time I need something, Belgrade just delights with a solution right there.
So yeah, it's very convenient and livable in the center. I don't think you've stayed out in the suburbs where
not extensively, but I've
visited
outside, and I think obviously the center is going to be where you'd probably be if you're staying here as an expat.
Yeah.
And so my perspective is coming from that. But even so, I find that there's ways to get around. There's a lot of local help to be found, and you can take the trams. You can get pretty cheap taxis. So there's really not a major issue with any of that. Yeah.
Yeah. The only major issue is that cab drivers from unreputable companies sometimes do try to scam you. Have you had that happen to you?
No, I've steered clear with that. I usually stick with Pink Taxi or Lux Taxi.
So you read about it before you came, yeah.
Well, I was told that very early on, and also, and Uber does not operate here. Taxify has now been kind of changed. There's Cargo is the service. Yandex. So there's ways to hail a cab, but I rarely, for the 30-minute walking radius in the center that you'll likely find yourself in most of the time, I rarely need a cab because it's also, and this is another topic we can get into, it's very safe and very well lit at night.
Yep.
And I'm not somebody who's a particularly nervous traveler. I think that most people in the world are good, and I think that most places are generally fine as long as you keep your wits about you in general.
Yep.
But even still, Belgrade,
this is one of these safest.
It's so safe, and in a very nonchalant way. It's not a police state. You don't feel like you're constantly being watched.
Decent.
They're decent, and also the place is organized in a way that you're not bugged out when you're walking around at night because the roads are very walkable, and there's street lamps and there's fountains and there's things happening. So I never feel uncomfortable. Whereas even places in Eastern Europe, for example, walking around Sofia, Bulgaria at night, I was bugged out. Sorry, anyone who likes that city. I did not feel particularly safe in Bulgaria.
I haven't been there overnight, but and this place just has a civility to it.
It does.
And it's like you're in a small village at the same time where people are watching what's going on, watching out. It doesn't have that big alienated city vibe that a lot of places do.
Agreed.
A lot of Western countries do as well.
Absolutely.
So let's hear about the other places you've been. And
so on my search for kind of my ideal home places, I found a few that are a real favorite for me. Istanbul is probably my base these days, if I had to pick one. I'm also a huge Asiaphile. I've spent a lot of time in China. I've lived in Malaysia and China, and been to Japan 5 or 6 times. I love Hong Kong. So I'm actually usually a big fan of very large cities and very bustling environments. And this connects to Belgrade in one way, because as much as Belgrade is kind of a small town feel, it also does not feel, in my opinion, at all particularly provincial or limited. It's
the capital of what is now, was the capital of what is now 7 countries.
Exactly.
So it has that sort of international thing, but
it does.
Combined with a smaller sort of,
It has always been the center of this part of Europe, and for that reason, you'll find a lot of very educated people, a lot of very interesting cultural institutions, which even if you're not going to museums every single day, being around
they
that.
Also didn't have that whole Eastern Bloc communism, which essentially killed all dissident intellectuals and
Exactly.
stuff. You know, like it was a little more
Yeah.
of a place that allowed arts and creative expression to thrive.
Right, and people think sometimes that Serbia, because it is kind of it's a Slavic country, they kind of associate it with that very like huge, like big statues of leaders and giant Soviet architecture. It's really not like that, and you'll actually even find more of that.
This part of the world is too varied to even permit for that sort of thing, you know?
But like, let's say even Bucharest, which is a huge fan of, which I'm actually a huge fan of Bucharest as well. Bucharest actually has more Soviet feel to it, in my opinion, than
because
Belgrade.
it was a Soviet-controlled puppet
Exactly.
state.
So you're not going to find that type. So if you're kind of looking to steer clear from that, like kind of cold, very, like you said, like just rough type city.
Yeah.
It has a softness to it.
I mean, you have the similar brutalist architecture here, but with a twist, with a little bit of an artistic sort of
for sure.
twist. There's just more. I don't know. I have cousins who grew up in Slovakia and stuff like that, and they
Right.
went through the worst of communism, and I heard all those stories growing up, and here you just don't have those types of stories. You don't.
agree.
The stories here are, well, everything went to hell in the 90s, and we had a ridiculous government that then got overthrown, and now things have been ridiculous since then. You know, whereas, yeah, the trouble is a little closer in the recent history.
Yes.
Than in Eastern Europe, where it was just like 90s and then rebuilding from there. Here it
For
was
sure.
90s and like hitting rock bottom and then
Right.
rebuilding in the last 15 years
Yeah.
or so.
And on that point, I actually find sometimes that cultures that have had a little bbit of a rough past at times, there's a kind of an appreciation for when things are good, and there's a little bit more of a presence because they know what life can be like.
It's more than just a little bit of a rough pass at times. It's like a constant, most war of any place in Europe that
Yeah.
has instilled strong values into the people of this city.
Right.
And you really feel it in the way that they interact.
Absolutely, and people. There's also a humility to the culture because
And a resilience.
A resilience because they know that they're not trying to be something that they're not. The people are very aware that there's much work to be done in terms of expanding and kind of restoring the city continually. So I really like being around cultures that are very willing and very open to kind of creating a different kind of future. And I actually find that Serbs are, like you said, remarkably resilient.
Yeah, resilient, and they have their own sort of code of honor.
Yes.
That's sort of like they're going to be hospitable. They're going to be proud of their country. They're also going to be curious about other places.
Right.
And they're also going to be speaking other languages and welcoming foreigners, while at the same time not letting what's special about this place slip away.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I noticed you were posting on Facebook over the last few days about some of the new developments around the city. For example, the Rajcheva shopping mall over there, which has been open for a year, and the Belgrade on Water project. As a local expat here, this is a controversial thing, and we do talk about all this amongst my circles of friends. And so, what's your opinion? When you see every year there's like more blocks closed down for the Belgrade waterfront, you see this new shopping mall, you don't really get what's the impression?
Yeah, so I came here 2017, which was actually an interesting year to come now that I look at the history, because it was just the year before a lot of these major projects started. So I have a baseline, and ever since then I've seen some things change. So there are some things that I support. For example, in any city, you're going to need to fix up certain squares and areas of asphalt, road, etc. that are breaking down, and you're also going to need to fix up certain facades of buildings. So I think the fixing up of the National Museum was a huge win.
That took
for
a
the
while.
city. I think it took a while, but it looks stunning, and I saw that be released last year with amazing light show, so that was a win. I think what they've done with Slavia is not particularly horrible. I think they've made it a little bit more walkable. I think Slavia was pretty rough to walk around before.
Yeah.
So I'm actually supportive of that. Do you want me to take it?
No,
But the biggest one that I'm against is, so the Belgrade waterfront has been a huge controversial topic, as you alluded to.
Yep.
And I very much don't support the project. Originally, I was kind of excited about it, but I very much question, obviously, the validity of the funds, the acquisition of that space and that land. I think it really destroys the traditional skyline of Belgrade. I'm a big skyline nut, and I think that Belgrade is a city that is best, that looks best at a mid-rise level with church steeples and that type of skyline. I love skyscrapers, so I'm not actually against skyscrapers in general.
Yeah.
But I just find that it does not fit. I think the design looks like an alien spaceship that landed on the city, and I think it's going to be a disaster.
Well, okay.
And I'm very against it.
Okay, I'm not so against it. Let me explain. People might think I would be against it or whatever. I'm going to save my opinion for when it opens. And I'm going to see what kind of urban space they create around it, and how livable it is for people, what kind of cafes and what kind of people move in there, and then I'm going to do my judgment. It's kind of, I do think there should be that sort of development, but I'm not really sure that they've thought it through enough, but I'm going to reserve my judgment for after it's finished.
Here's why I'm against it from the start, though. So, for example, as a contrast, Rayacheva Mall, I think was a great addition to the city. I think a city center built in modern shopping space is going to be necessary in most European capitals. I think I think the actual building is actually pretty attractive compared to some malls I've seen.
It's pretty good, yeah.
I think it's built in well to Knez. I think the shops that are there are some Serbian brands, there's some international brands. I think the Starbucks there looks great at this point.
It's non-obtrusive.
It's non-obtrusive, and it was well built, and it actually comes in handy for if you need to go to the bathroom, for example. I go in there all the time.
Especially after a Starbucks coffee.
Absolutely. And so I'm not against, again, I'm actually very much a modernist. I really believe in developing cities for the future. So that's an example that I think that works. The reason, again, that I'm particularly against Belgrade Waterfront is I think the placement of it is particularly obtrusive to one of the main assets to the city, which is the primary skyline. I think that I don't believe in the politics that happened in order for it to come to be. And I also don't, from what I've seen of the project, it does not integrate with the vibe of the city. It looks...
that's what we need to see.
Right.
That's the main thing that needs to be
Well,
seen.
like, for example, this whole gallery and mall type thing, luxury living high. All of those things are great in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in these places that have that type of lifestyle.
But there is an elegance in Serbian culture. These people want to be somehow fancy. There's, like, if you look at some of the bars around Dorchel and stuff like that, there is a yearning towards that.
But it is fancier. I think that it's already fancy
in an old world way. In an old world way. Okay.
And if they had built, for example, that type of skyscraper project in Novi Belgrade, for example, as kind of this like new Belgrade city.
They did. There's when they had a few years ago they built I forget what it's called, but it's over up the Sava River a bit, and there's stuff like that there, Airport City, all that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good placement for it because it doesn't disturb from that historical part of the city, and it allows for those types of developments to happen and for people to enjoy. Because I do believe that everyone should be able to enjoy, if they want to go to a cool high-rise observatory or something like that. I think that does add to a city.
Yeah, they should have probably added on to Ušće or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm against that project. But other things that are happening, I don't know what they're doing with Trg Republike. It looks a little messy. I'm curious to see how that's going to look.
Yeah.
Not particularly
at this
supportive.
point there's just so much going on, and it's at least they're doing something, for so long this place was just sort of crumbling, and now there's new bike lanes, they're redoing this street, that street, bam bam bam. The traffic's become horrible because of all the construction, but at least there's progress. You can always say, like, even in Canada where I grew up, like the use of public funds is very questionable, and here especially questionable sometimes, but at the same time, hats off to them for building the city and envisioning a future that includes other countries like China and the Emirates, and just all these, like, foreign investment is welcome here, but it's welcome in a non-exclusive way. They're open to China, they're open to Russia, they're open to the Emirates, they're open to India, and it's I think that's the best way that this country can align itself politically, is just being like it was during Tito's time, non-aligned.
Well, I think the biggest caution, and just to kind of close this topic, is that I think Belgrade needs to stay true to what it's good at, and I also think that this desire to emulate or to catch up with or keep up with the Joneses of other European cities, for example, plopping one of those city signs that looks like the I Am Amsterdam sign, I personally don't see the need to make Belgrade like every other European city. That's part of the reason that I like it. And I wish that some of the leadership would start to own what they're good at, because Serbs are so great at so many things, and there is, because of the rough past and because of the economic struggle here, this constant comparison outwards, and this constant, we need to be as good as blank.
Not just outwards, but westwards.
Well, whatever, just looking towards trying to become something
I mean,
else.
this is really developed if you compare it to like Ukraine, any country in Africa, so on and so forth. But everybody idealizes Germany, and maybe we don't want to be Germany here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got to be its own thing. Maybe it's got to be more, I don't know. Just there's something about that they're selling off too much of this country already to outside of the country. And what's really special about this place is all of the independent local businesses.
Yes.
I mean, we talked about Starbucks. I'm a fan of Starbucks because I like 4 shots of espresso in water. That's the Americano for 260 dinars, rather than if you go to one of these smaller places, you have to get a double espresso for 240 dinars and have 3 of those to have the same strengths as the Starbucks. That's my case. I'm a junkie. I go there because of that. But, you know, if the small cafes in Belgrade gave me the same product, I'd always choose to go there rather than the international one. And just this local culture that you still can, if you made a decision to spend money entirely locally and live a really good life, you could.
Absolutely.
There's enough, like food, local goods, and maybe we don't have smartphones that are made here, and computers, but that's about it.
Sure. I
Yeah, and it's not like in a lot of countries where you don't even have access to fresh local food anymore. It's all
There's a very vibrant domestic food production here, which is really refreshing, and I think you just, especially in the summer, you can really find that anywhere.
Okay, so what advice would you, having seen what you've seen of the world, and being in your early to mid 20s, what advice would you give Serbian people your age about how they can either make their life here better first, or get out into the world and where they could go?
Well, I think young Serbs are very digitally literate in a way that is really inspiring to me. I think there's a huge abundance of tech talent and very future-focused talent that's being developed here that isn't fully tapped into.
Yeah.
I know your business works in that space,
Yeah.
and I think that's going to be a real path towards allowing, for example, people to earn an international standard income, because the incomes here are still very low, which will be the biggest limiter for people to expand their their choices in life.
Yeah.
So I think the more that Serbs can kind of brand and package their skills to American companies, to other European companies, which is already happening in some ways, but to really stand in their skills here, I think that's a huge way to increase, particularly on the kind of lifestyle and financial side. I think other than that, the Serbian passport is an amazing passport. I study passports, and it's actually a very you're visa-free to China, you're visa-free to all of Europe, obviously. You're visa-free to a lot of places that are actually...
Just the Anglo countries kind of lock them out.
So, obviously the UK and US are going to give everyone problems anyway, pretty much.
Especially Serbs.
Yeah, but in general, I mean, again, there's this kind of like, oh, well, we're not as good as, because we're not Germany and Belgium and Luxembourg. It's like, no, Serbia is a wonderful country. I would say to them, take pride in the history of this country, in the natural beauty of it, in the urban space of Belgrade, which is, heard from me for what that's worth. I've seen a lot of cities, and this is one of my favorite in the world. And so I think the more that they can just step into their gifts, I think it's
pretty clear to
key.
me. Yeah, but the path for young people here is entrepreneurship. There's no lack of opportunity and smart people, but what they need is leadership, I think.
Yeah, and I think confidence to really, again, own what they're good at. And I think also aligning with China is going to be a really big key.
One thing, so what would you tell them about going to China? Because actually a lot of Serbian people, friends that I know, have gone to China to teach English.
Yeah, well, Serbs have some of the best English in Europe, in my opinion. I think the natural accent of the Serbian language has very little interference with English most of the time. And so for that reason, they often become English teachers, like you said. And I think Serbs are naturally very athletic and attractive people. Again, I'm generalizing, but I think they have the capacity to be excellent in the hospitality industry, in teaching. And I think with China, China is it's old news that it's the biggest market in the world, and I think that the fact that China and Serbia have had some type of tie now with a lot of Chinese tourists coming here because it's visa-free, it's a smart choice. I think that a lot of Europe has no idea what's coming for it as far as the need to be engaged with China, and so I think if Serbs can do business with China, it's a huge asset. I think a lot of Chinese travelers just want to come to Europe, and they don't really care whether it's Serbia or whether it's wherever.
How easy is it to learn Chinese?
I think it's pretty easy to learn Chinese. I think
really okay.
I think people get really caught up in the fact that there's characters and tones. Those are the two biggest pieces. And if you can just study some characters, the first 500 to 1,000, and really get them down pat, and to just get over the fact that there's tones and realize that there's actually tone in all language. We just don't codify it as tone. For example, saying, "Are you there?" Or, those types of things happen in all languages. So if you just kind of move past that mental block, and it's very easy to put together sentences in Chinese. The grammar is very simple. And it's also really fun to practice with Chinese people because they're very open to practicing with you. So I actually think the biggest factor in learning a language is not whether it's linguistically the most difficult, but whether you actually have opportunities to practice it.
And a passion for the culture.
Well, yeah, but also people who are willing to practice it with you. For example, French being an example where the speaker base is not as interested in practicing with you most of the time.
Yeah, okay.
So I think Serbs should learn Chinese.
Where would you say in China would be the city to go if you want a vibe like this?
There's nothing remotely comparable, but if you want a vibe,
I've heard good things about Shanghai from some friends.
Yeah, they're such in different categories. I can't even answer that question. But if you want a place that's more open to foreigners, that's more open to learning opportunities, Shanghai is a great city. But it's by my account the largest city proper in the world. So it's a huge project to undertake, and I was there for 6 months and still only scratched the surface. So Shanghai's a big project. I would say to head to smaller cities in China that are growing, places like Xiamen, or places like in northern China like Shenyang and Dalian are cities that are really remarkably or Qingdao is very cosmopolitan city in China. Or of course, Beijing is always a great project, but also a little bit of a mega city. And Shenzhen and the Hong Kong region, of course. But Hong Kong is not part of China, in my opinion, still. So that would be a separate project as well. And Taiwan being a separate project as well. So I think those are all places to start, yeah.
So what are you looking forward to doing in your time in Belgrade?
So I'm here for about 3 more weeks. I am looking forward to enjoying some great food, heading hopefully to 25 May pool for a couple swims, maybe to Ada for a few days for some nice summer moments, going to my favorite restaurants, going to, what else? Maybe a little bit of shopping on Knez, I don't know, and working on a lot of projects that I have. The internet's fast here, easy to get a SIM card, a lot of spaces to work. Co-working here is probably some of the best in Europe, and really can't complain, yeah.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for sharing your impressions in Belgrade.
So
it's amazing always to meet somebody who's so switched on about culture in a similar way to me and likes this place. So I hope that was useful for the viewers to hear your perspective. And
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for giving us the chance to talk to you.
Thank you. Fala.
Ciao.